Welcome to the tutorial. In this video I'll be showing you how to make dashing in an advanced 2D platformer. Now this is a part 2 of a part 1, so if you haven't watched part 1, make sure to watch it on my channel, how to make an advanced 3D platformer in under 15 minutes. You should see that in a card in the top right corner, but if you don't see it, you can just go directly to my channel. But make sure to watch that first because that's what this is built upon. Now the first thing we're going to do in terms of making this advanced 3D platformer, the one thing that we're going to be doing in this part 2 is adding a dash. Now the dash is kind of more complicated than it looks, but it's not too complicated. It's just kind of tedious to make. But in order for us to make the dash, the way that we're gonna do our dash, let me preview the game. The way that we're gonna do our dash is we'll be able to dash in all the 8 directions. We're not gonna be able to freely dash, or we'll need something like a cursor or a control stick or something like that. But so we're using a keyboard. We're gonna be able to dash in the 8 directions horizontally, but we're also going to be able to do a slightly upwards dash as well. So that's what we're going to be adding. Now, in order for us to actually start doing this, I'm going to first set up some setup variables. So I'm going to double click into the player, then go into variables, and you'll see that we only have one object variable. Now, you could make these scene variables if you wanted to, but it's great to have them as object variables because it doesn't take up scene variable space for no reason. And these are specific to the player. So I'm going to actually add 3 variables in this case, and I'm going to add 3 variables, of course, and the first one is going to be called ghost direction. Now, you may not know what this is going to all do, but make sure, just follow this along first, and I'll explain these variables as we actually start creating the code for them. But name the first one ghost direction. Of course, it can be any name, but if you want to follow along perfectly, just follow what I'm doing right now. But number is going to be a number variable. I'm also going to have a variable that's a boolean called isDashing, and this is kind of straightforward. This is going to just tell whether or not the player is dashing. It needs to know whether the player is dashing, and by default we're going to have this equal to false, and we're also going to have one more variable. This is also going to be a boolean, and this variable is going to be called can_jump_dash. Can_jump_dash, and this will be checking whether or not the player can actually jump dash. Of course, this will make much more sense once we actually start coding. Now once you have all these set up, hit apply, and now we can go into the events. Now you see that we have all these events here. I'm going to actually add a new event, and I'm going to right click the event, and I'm going to put add, and I'm going to add an event group, and I'm going to name this dash, and this is just a way of organizing code better so your code is not really junky or sloppy. So I'm going to drag this condition under the dash group, and now that you'll see it has a drop down menu that was under it. And the first thing we're going to do is actually make the formula for the diagonal dash, not the jump dash, but the diagonal. Now, of course, you could use any button you want for the dash, but in this case, I'm actually going to use the mouse clicking button for the dash, but just know that this will work for any button. So I'm going to add a condition, go into other conditions, and then you go into mouse and touch. Like I said, if you want to, you could use keyboard. And I'm going to put for mouse, I'm going to put if mouse button is pressed or touch held, that'll work for mobile. And I'm going to use the left key because that's what people mostly use for action when it comes to video games. And I want to check if isDashing is false. Basically, we don't want to be able to dash if dashing is false. There's going to be a cooldown, because if there's no cooldown, we're just going to be able to keep infinitely dashing. We'll be able to go really fast, and that's not normal in most video games. So I'm going to put and. We want to check if the variable isDashing is false. So since we're going to be accessing object variable, we want to click to the player first. We can't go into other conditions and put variables. We have to click into the player, and then I'm going to type in variable, and of course we have a boolean variable here, that's the 1, and I'm going to put isDashing, and we're trying to check if isDashing is false. That's the only way we'll be able to dash. Now let's actually start doing the code. Now the first thing we want to actually do is set isDashing to true, because now if dashing is true, we won't be able to keep pressing the left key or the left click and keep dashing. So the first thing we're actually going to do is set the object variable isDashing to true. So I'm going to click into player, type in variable, and change the object variable, or change the boolean object variable isDashing equal to true. So now that that's equal to true, now we want to actually do the dashing code. So I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to go into player, and we want to add a force. So I'm going to put add, and you'll see add a force, and we don't want to just add a regular force because this applies a certain force on the x-axis or the y-axis. We want to add a force at an angle. So the angle that we're going to do, that's going to be based on the ghost direction, and let me explain the ghost direction here. Basically, the ghost direction, I'm going to be using the arrow keys, and let's say we're pressing W, for example. When we're pressing W, our ghost direction will be equal to 0 for example. So basically, just by us pressing a key, the game will know which direction the player is about to dash in, and it will dash in that direction according to which key you're holding. So in this case, we want to add the angle that we're going to be using is ghost direction. But of course, in order to access that variable, we must, since there's an object variable of the player, we must put player, and then we can put dot ghost direction. And right now, by default, ghost direction is equal to 0. And I'm going to have this at 500 pixels. Now, I'm going to use a permanent force because if we use an instant force, it's just going to like add it on one frame. It's going to add the force on one frame, and that'll just be very short. We want it to be permanent, but we're going to stop it manually. As you can see, if you use a permanent force, you're going to have to stop it manually using a stop the object event. So now that we have that, we're going to wait 0.5 seconds, then we're going to stop the dash. So in order to do this, is very easy in Gdevelop. I'm going to go into other actions, timers and time, and then I'm going to put wait X seconds. And we want to wait 0.5 seconds, which means half a second. And then after that, we want to stop the object. So I'm going to add an action, click into player, I'm going to type in stop, and you'll see stop the object. It will stop all forces on the object, because that's the only way to get rid of a permanent force. And also, I want to wait 1 second, because basically we don't want the dash cooldown to end right when the dashing movement ended, or basically seem like it's infinite. So we want to wait another second, and then we'll be able to dash again. So I'm going to copy this and paste it, and instead of waiting 0.5 seconds, I'm going to wait 1 second. Keep in mind, this timer right here is basically the dash cooldown. And this timer on top, wait 0.5 seconds, this is how long the dash lasts. So the first one, how long is the dash lasting, and the second one is how long is the cooldown. So you can change these to whatever variables you want them to be. So now we're going to set the Boolean variable of player to be if dashing to be true. Well, not to be true, it'll be false. So I'm going to type in variable, and it's going to be another Boolean variable, and I'm going to put is dashing is now equal to false. So if I press preview, if I move around, of course, if I click, you see I dash forward. And of course, you can make this faster if you want to by making the permanent force a higher number. But you see, if you keep clicking, you can't just keep spamming the dash. But a problem you have is that we can only dash forward. Of course, that kind of looked diagonal, but that was just me holding in the direction. And of course, I can't dash backwards. I can't dash to the side. So that's not really favorable for a dash. So that's when the ghost direction comes in. So when it comes to the ghost direction, basically, like I said, when you're pressing down certain keys, the ghost direction would be set to a different angle. So let's say, for example, we're pressing the D key. If we're pressing the D key, that means we more than likely want to move to the right. So that means the ghost direction would be set to 90. And like I said, right here, we're adding the force at an angle, which is the ghost direction. So that's what we're going to start doing now. Now, keep in mind, this part is extremely tedious, and you need to pay close attention because if you don't put the code right in here, if you even mess up one little part of it, your code is going to not work right, and it's going to be really hard to figure out why it's not working right because it's a very, very tedious process. Now, the first thing we're going to do is, actually, we're going to make it so, let me make the conditions first, and then I'll explain it a little bit. So other conditions, we want to go into keyboard, variables, and key pressed. And of course, we're using ASDW. So we want to check if A is not pressed. If A is not pressed, and we're inverting the condition. And let me explain it. Basically, we're going to do this. We're going to have a default dash direction. And the default dash direction is 0, straightforward. So basically, what we're going to do first is check whether or not any of the keys are pressed. So if no keys are being pressed, A is not being pressed, D, S, W, all of those. If those are not being pressed, then we set ghost direction to 0. So even if we dash without holding an arrow key, it will automatically be set to 0 when we stop moving. So I'm going to put and. Once again, this is very tedious, and make sure that you follow along closely so you don't mess up. I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste it 3 times because there's 3 other keys besides A. And I'm going to put if S key is not pressed. And I'm going to put if W key is not pressed. And if D key is not pressed. Add anything besides A. If none of these are pressed, we're going to set the object variable ghost direction to be equal to 0. So I'm going to type in player. We'll click player. And then I'm going to type in variable. And now we want to change the number variable. And this number variable that's going to be changed is going to be, of course, ghost direction. And it's going to be set to 0. So that's that right there. Like I said, make sure to follow along closely because if you mess up one part of this, it's not going to work right. Now the second thing we want to do is make the right dash. And of course for right, we're going to be pressing D. So first we want to check if D is pressed. So I'm going to go into events and control flow. Well, not events and control flow. Input, key press, and we want to check if D is pressed. And we want to check if all the other keys are not pressed. And the reason why we want to do this is because the game has to know which direction the dash in at all times. So if we're pressing two buttons at the same time, that would confuse the game. So by making it so no other key can be pressed in order to be in a certain direction, that makes sure the game will never be confused on where to dash. So I'm going to put and, events and control flow and I'm going to put in, I'm going to actually copy these, paste it 3 times. And we want to check if every key is not pressed except for D. So we already have S in there. And now I'm going to put A and then W. We're trying to check if all these keys are not pressed. And we also have to check this because we're going to also have diagonal directions where you're going to have to be pressing 2 keys at once. So this just makes sure you're only holding in one direction. I'm going to put W. And now we want to change ghost direction. I'm going to copy it and paste it here. Ghost direction is going to be set equal to 90 degrees. 90 degrees. So if I preview now, and if I hold D, and then I click, you'll see I dash to the right. And if I just hold nothing, and then I click, I automatically dash forward by default. Keep in mind, your dash will help you with your momentum. So if I'm already moving right, the dash will make it faster. But if I just press right once and then dash, it's not going to be as fast because I wasn't holding it as long. So it'll be based on your momentum as well. So that's with the right key press. Now we want to do the rest of the key presses. So now we have to also check. We have to also check if we want diagonal up. Diagonal right up. Like I said, this can be extremely tedious, but we're going to still do it. We're going to do a diagonal right up. So for the diagonal right up, we want to check if D key is pressed and if W key is pressed. So I'm going to actually copy this right here and paste it. We're going to be doing a lot of copy and pasting here. And instead of checking if W key is not being pressed, now we want to also check if W key is being pressed. So we're going to uninvert this condition. And now the angle, we want to set it to an angle in between 0 and 90. And the angle that's halfway between 0 and 90 is 45. So now I'm going to preview this. And if I hold W and D, and then I dash, I'll dash diagonally. So we're going to try to move faster. That's right there. And now we want to do left. We want to do the left dash. In order for us to do the left dash, that means we're going to have the A key being pressed. And we're going to check if every other key besides A is being pressed. So I'm going to make sure S is not being pressed. Okay, make sure D is not being pressed. And we have all the other keys. And we're going to set the ghost direction now to be equal to 270. That's going to be the ghost direction now. So I'm going to hit preview. And if I hold A and then dash, it'll go dash in that direction. Okay, that's working well. Now I'm going to copy and paste this once again. Like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of copy and pasting. And now we want to check if A key and W key is being pressed. So we're going to uninvert this W condition right here. And just to make it look better, I'm going to drag it up here. And now we're going to set the ghost direction equal to -45. Because think about diagonal up is 45 positive. So if we're trying to go diagonal left, we want to actually go -45. So once again, I'm going to preview to make sure everything's working right. If A key and W is pressed, I dash diagonally. So that's great. And last but not least, we have to be able to dash backwards. In the backwards dash, we want to check if the S key is actually being pressed. So I'm going to once again copy and paste this code. And now instead of checking if the A key is being pressed, we're going to check if the S key is being pressed. And also, we want to make sure the S key, this S is replaced with, let me see the one that's missing. We're missing A. So we want to check if A key is also not being pressed. And the ghost direction for S will be 180 because that's behind the player. And now, of course, we have to do diagonal downwards left. We have to do a diagonal left and a diagonal right for this. So I'm going to copy and paste this S. So much copy and pasting here, but that's why I told you it's so tedious. And we want to check if S key and we want to check if the D key is being pressed. S key and the D key, and that'll be downwards right. Downwards right. So we have this copy here, and we want to check if the D key is being pressed. and we want to change the ghost direction to be equal to 135. And like I said, this is all based on halfway points between values. And now we want to also put it, so I'm going to copy this one more time and paste it. And instead of checking whether or not the D key is pressed, we're going to invert this condition again. We want to now check if S key and A are being pressed. So I'm going to uninvert this A condition. And now we want to set the ghost direction to 225. So I'm going to test this out. And if I can dash diagonally downwards toward the right and diagonally downwards toward the left. Lastly, we're going to do one more piece of code, and we're going to set it so if W key is being pressed, we want to set the ghost direction to equal to 0, which is our default, because that's forward. So now we want to check if W key is being pressed, and replace this W not being pressed with S not being pressed, and we set the ghost direction to be equal to 0. And now if I preview this, I can dash freely in all the 8 directions. Of course, if you had a control stick or something like that, you'll kind of need a ghost cursor or something, but you could do all directions. But in our case, since we're using a keyboard, we can't do all directions here. But that's how you do a regular dash. And of course, if you have run into any bugs, make sure to rewatch this part slowly, because if you even mess up one of these conditions, things are not going to work right when you're trying to test out the game. Now, the last thing we're going to do is do like a upwards dash, where the dash moves you slightly upwards. And in order to do this, I'm actually going to copy and paste this condition. Well, let's copy and paste this condition, because I think it's pretty similar to this. And no, I'm actually going to make it fresh so it can be better. So I'm going to add a condition. And for the upwards dash, we're going to use the right key on the mouse. Of course, you can set this to wherever you want, like I said. And one more thing I forgot to do. When we have these buttons pressed down, you can put trigger once, so you can't just hold the click button. So I'm going to add a condition here. Go to events and control flow and trigger once while true. And trigger once. So now we can't just hold the mouse button press. But for this upwards dash, we're going to use the right key press to activate it, the right click. So I'm going to go into mouse and touch, go into button pressed or held, and put the right key on the mouse. And I'm going to put and. First of all, we want to check and. We want to see if is dashing is false, because we don't want to be able to do an upwards dash if we just did a regular dash. So we want to check if is dashing is false. So I'm going to paste it here. And we also want to check if the Boolean variable that we had earlier, can jump dash, is equal to true. We want to see if that's equal to true. And let me actually go back into my object variable to make sure it's true by default, and it is. We're checking if it's true, because if this is not true, we won't be able to jump dash. So the first thing we want to do is set the Boolean variable is dashing to be equal to true. And we also want to allow the player to jump again. The player will be able to jump again. So it will be essentially giving the player extra jump, because it's simulating a jump. So I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to click into player, and I'm going to find where it says allow jumping again, and it will allow one more jump, and then we're going to simulate the jump. So I'm going to click into our player, and now we want to find where it says actually simulate the jump. So where can I find this? Let me see. Simulate. We have simulate jump key press right here. Simulate jump key press, and we also want to be able to dash in that same direction that we've been holding. We're dashing in that same direction, because if we didn't dash in a direction, it would just be another double jump. So I'm going to copy and paste the same piece of code right here, and we're going to dash, and then we're going to wait. We're going to set can jump dash to be equal to false. Can jump dash will be set equal to false, so we won't be able to jump dash anymore after that. So I'm going to click into player, type in variable, and change the Boolean variable can jump dash equal to false. And now we're going to wait 0.5 seconds. This is how long the dash lasts. Once again, you can make it longer. So I'm going to go into timers and time, wait X seconds, and it's going to be 0.5, half a second. And then after we do this, I'm going to stop all player forces. So the dash will stop. I'm going to type in stop and stop the object. And then we're going to also wait a second, because that shows the dash cooldown. So I'm going to copy and paste this timer and replace the 0.5 with 1. And then I'm going to set the Boolean. Well, the Boolean is dashing is also going to be set equal to false, and we'll be able to dash again after that. The Boolean is dashing equal to false. Gonna hit preview. And now if I jump, let's say I jump and I right click, you'll see the dash goes upwards. Even though it went forward, it went upwards. But one problem that we have is that the dash is never coming back to us. We can't upwards dash again. So that's a problem in our code. So let's go see what the problem is. So we see that is dashing is equal to false. Okay, it has to be equal to false. And can jump dash has to be equal to true. The problem here is that we set can jump dash back equal to false, and we really need to set it to true. So that's what we need to change. And now I'll be able to dash infinitely. Of course, there's a cooldown, but I can actually dash diagonally now. I can dash diagonally. So that's how you actually make dashing in an advanced 3D platformer. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. Unfortunately, I will not be continuing this series unless it has... I want it to reach over 2K views, because the reason why is, even though I love working on the advanced 2D platformer, I unfortunately can't stay on the same topic forever because there's other topics that people need to learn in Gdevelop, so I can't stay on the same topic forever. But if this reaches 2,000 views combined with the first part, I will keep updating. I'll make another part if it reaches 2,000 views combined with the first part. And that'll show me that you all really want an advanced 3D platformer. But I have to work on other tutorials in the meantime. But I want to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, you can like, subscribe, and comment down below. That will help the algorithm and just show me that you enjoyed the video. You can comment down below what tutorials you would like to see next on the Cube the Game Dev channel. You can also become a member of the channel for $0.99 a month and get some extra perks that are listed in there. Or if you just want to support the channel to help me continue to make videos in the future. Once again, comment down below which videos you'd like to see me do next, and I'll catch you in the next tutorial. See ya.